Welcome to the Athletic Skills Podcast, the show where we help sports coaches, S&C coaches, and PE teachers learn how they can impact their athletes' movement and physical development in a fun, practical way. I'm your host, Isaac, founder of Athletic Skills, and in today's episode, we test Jake Foster, who is Head S&C at Royal Russel School. We go through Jake's journey of how he became an S&C coach and his learnings along the way with some great advice for those coaches on the same journey. Jake's journey is different to the norm, where it all started with him coaching within wheelchair racing, and now he even has had the opportunity to go to the Olympics in Paris. He also shares on how he navigated his way through his degree to get the most out of his development, and what were his biggest learnings from working in professional football, from interning to leading groups, and now he is leading the S&C in a private school sector. Don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review if you enjoy the show. Now let's get... This podcast is brought to you by Brendan Chaplin Business Coaching. Brendan guides coaches and service-based entrepreneurs to deliver their best work, build a seven-figure lifestyle and performance business, and create a life of freedom. I started working with Brendan in September 2023, and it's been a great journey since I started working with him in launching my own business, Athletic Skills. Brendan has been fully invested in me and is a great person to chat with, to share ideas, and has vast knowledge and experiences to share also. The reason I picked to work with Brendan is that he has done it himself in launching businesses and has a similar background to myself in S&C and wants to live a life that you want. If you want to speak to Brendan on how he can help create a life of freedom and guide you on that journey, get in touch with him by one of the methods in the show notes and DM him the word coach, and he will start the conversation. You won't regret it, and there's a good chance it might just change your life too. Hi everyone, welcome to Athletic Skills Podcast. Delighted to have Jake on. Mr. Jake is Head S&C at Royal Russel School, so thank you, Jake, for joining me today. I'm sure we've spoken very briefly before, but you're a very busy person. You must have a good love for strength and conditioning. So can you just give us 3 reasons why you got into S&C before we chat about your journey and how you got to where you're at now?
Yeah, so I'm not sure there's 3 clear reasons. I just made a rash decision and I've ran with it the last 10 or so years. I was at St Mary's University with one of my athletes, David Weir, who's a wheelchair racer. I've known Dave all my life. When I was in like year 9, because my nan's his coach, how I fell into sport anyway, just through my nan. I was at St Mary's with him and I met a guy called Jed Knight, and Jed Knight was taking on Dave's S&C for that day. And I started speaking to Jed. Jed explained it really well, and it really gave me like an interest in what goes into sport alongside the main activity that you're doing. Sort of made that decision in like year 9, year 10, where I was like, okay, I'm just going to go to St Mary's and do a strength and conditioning degree. And then from there, didn't really even consider anything else. I just got hell bent on making that happen, about that my own way as well, because done all right in my GCSEs and done the standard thing where didn't revise because I've got a decent ability to retain information, and then comes to A-levels, thought, yeah, I'll be able to do the same thing. Absolutely flopped my A-levels, had to go to college for 2 years to make sure I could get to St Mary's. But yeah, that's the reason we got into it. It was all because of Dave Weir and a lovely man called Jed Knight, who I'm still very...
I like that. It's a very different story to other people, and it's a completely different sport to many would probably perceive from the norm in strength and conditioning, and you get quite a good insight into different areas of coaching as well, I imagine. So what were those first few experiences like when you were observing the wheelchair sort of training, and then any sort of learnings to kind of take towards that you're still doing now?
It's like I have a very Irish nan is the only way I can describe it, right? So she's been David's coach forever, since before I was born. And in terms of learning, it was very much, I'm on the way to my athletics training. I've done my athletics training. I go over to my nan, I'm waiting to go home. She goes, oh, you're going to take the sessions today? So you what? So I've rocked up. She's given me a piece of paper with a session on it and I'm explaining it to everyone. And it was very much a sink or swim environment. And I didn't get away with that because she's my nan. And I learned that that's the way I act best. And my initial learning is that when you're delivering a program, whether it be on a track or in a gym, you're playing the character that the people in front of you need you to play. You're playing the person that's going to get the best out of them. So I was lucky. I was at a performing arts school anyway. I did a drama GCSE and everything, so I knew how to act to some degree. But yeah, I just fell into not like a drill sergeant's role, but learned that some athletes need that compassion and some athletes need that bit of tough love to get them through it. So it was just playing the character was my first real learning. And I think that's one that I'm going to keep with me forever.
How did you find being a new coach completely and maybe novice and maybe not as confident in terms of your own knowledge or delivery, actually going in front of experienced athletes like Dave Weir there, who's an experienced athlete? How did you find that experience trying to tell them what to do and coach them through and how to get better?
It wasn't as daunting as you'd expect, but that's because I had the luxury of knowing David my entire life, and he'll give me a bit of respect, but equally, if I'm doing a rubbish job, he'll tell me. So it wasn't that daunting to me because I know there was no level of expectation on me to come in and be as good as the coach he normally has, because he's the best coach in the country. It was going to be tough, right? So I don't know, I just dealt with it in my own little way of, I expect nothing of myself here, and if they enjoy it and I can see what's going on, and I had a bit knowledge on the wheelchair racing going into it, so I could provide some bits of detail, but what are you going to tell a 6-time Paralympic gold medalist that he doesn't already know, right?
I'm curious just to move away from that and see what actually are the key components of wheelchair racing in terms of strength and conditioning. It'd be quite interesting to know what goes on, because I imagine it's different to the norm sports out there.
So yeah, so in terms of the S&C side, I'm quite lucky in the fact that I do technical and S&C, so I can sort of program to match exactly what I'm doing on the track. But in terms of key components, you're similar to all your other sports. One of your first ports of call is injury prevention. These guys are doing cyclist levels of mileage, even if they're a 100-meter sprinter. So you've got to, one, prep the body and make sure it's able to take an absolute kick. Equally, looking at it from a backward standpoint of, yes, it's a pushing sport, but the pull is more important than the push. If you can't get a strong pull, as in pulling your arms backwards, you're not going to have a maximal or optimal push. So going in the gym and making sure that athletes understand that the stuff you can't see is a bit more important than the stuff you can see in the mirror. That's been the main bit, trying to drill into them and keeping it very general. It's tough to find any science on it as well. So that was the real one, is figure it out on the fly, and you've got to do what makes sense to you until you're proven otherwise.
Imagine working with athletes that have restrictions in terms of movement or in terms of what they can will help you going forward in terms of working with other athletes and how you adapt your programs to different sorts of athletes that you see in front of you, and also adapt to what you mentioned on the fly as well.
Yeah, working with the range of disabilities that we have down at the Weir Archer Academy is the best sort of introduction into S&C and coaching I could ever have, because no job is going to be harder in terms of having to adapt things on the fly and figuring things out for how they turn up on the day than that. We're dealing with guys with high tone CP. You're then dealing with guys with relatively less severe cerebral palsy. You're then dealing with guys, spinal bifida like David, so he's a T54, so he's waist down. You're dealing with guys with chest down, guys with core, guys with no core. You're dealing with quadriplegics. Like, these are all guys that we deal with in one big session, and we have to make adjustments every single day on the fly, because these guys are on medication as well. They're going to turn up one day and be 100%. They'll turn up another day, be 40%.
So imagine you've already did a lot of learnings there before you went and did a degree at St. Mary's. Why did you pick to go through like the degree process, and then what were your key learnings through your degree that you'd say that you got to take forward?
Chose to go through the degree because, like I said, year 9 or 10, I just made that decision and wasn't going to be told otherwise, regardless of if people thought I needed it or not. And then as I was getting older and started meeting people around UK athletics, they were saying that you really need to start having a degree. So it was a nice bit of reinforcement to go there. The biggest thing I learned through my degree, it's tough because you're so much more outside of your degree than you do in it. I think just getting a really good in-depth understanding of the body, and then I found my niche that I wanted to work in a lot more. So when you go through an S&C degree, especially at St. Mary's, your first year is pretty general, and then your second year you get into the specificity of everything. I would assume it's the same in most places. I found a real love for biomechanics when I was there, and I thought that's going to be my niche. That's going to be my thing. That's going to be where I'm really good. And I got to speak to the lecturers and everyone around it, and that's the biggest bit of advice I can give for anyone who's considering or is currently going through a degree. Make friends with your lecturers because they know people. And that's the biggest thing you can get out of uni, and that is probably the biggest thing I got out of uni is I made friends with the right people and was able to get the right teachings from them, and then use their contacts to some extent to get to places.
No, I completely agree. I think I can resonate with that in terms of I managed to get placements through speaking to lecturers who maybe just 5 minutes at the end of your lecture or your seminar, you just chat to them, want to ask them certain questions, maybe relate if you're coaching them out and you want to ask them for their feedback on things as well. And then you never know where that might take you. They might say, if you go speak to so-and-so, they might be able to help you show more on this area and so on. So I think I completely agree. And I think that continues as well outside of degree in terms of having a good network around you and speaking to people in terms of other coaches and within your sport and other sports as well. And you never know where that'll take you.
Definitely. I think networking was space in this world that I really didn't place enough value on when I was at uni. And it's only when I sort of progressed out a bit that I really noticed how much I needed it. And I was lucky I'd done the groundwork with a few lecturers that I was pretty good friends with and had worked with in the para space.
You obviously, whilst you're doing your degree, you're coaching your wheelchair stuff, but alongside the year, did some interning at Crystal Palace. So, what was the value in terms of coaching at the same time as doing your degree, and how did that help you?
I think that is the best thing you can do on a degree, because it's all well and good sitting in a lecture and taking in information, but I could sit in a lecture and go to Weir Archer and apply what I've learned about, I don't know, like the physiology of the body. And then from a biomechanics lecture, we're looking at sprint mechanics. I'll go to Crystal Palace and they're really movement heavy on the way they deliver their S&C, and they're all about fundamental movement skills. So I'd come straight out of a biomechanics lecture, drive 2.5 hours across London and get into Crystal Palace and be able to apply exactly what I've just learned. And I've had 2.5 hours in a class to think and stew on it. Think of the questions I wanted to ask the people who I'm there trying to help and who are there trying to teach me.
And how did that internship come about? So it's quite hard for a student, I imagine, to get those sort of placements in terms of the competitiveness, but also having that opportunity to speak to those coaches in those roles at professional clubs. So how did that come about?
St Mary's are really good, and obviously, like most degrees now, they have a placement section in their second year. That came about through the university and Crystal Palace having a link with doing a MRes, so a master's in research. And the way Crystal Palace wanted to set that up was they'll have people come in from second year, do their third year at Palace as well, and then progress through into their MRes to a Crystal Palace. So I got it through that, which was quite lucky. Worked under a guy called Kurt Greatorex, who was brilliant. Went through the interview process there and then got sidelined by COVID for a little bit, but we managed to get a little bit in.
And then how did that internship evolve in terms of your responsibilities? So I imagine at the start, you're maybe just doing more observing and the smaller jobs are alongside that. But how did that internship evolve so you had more responsibility and opportunity to actually coach?
So they were really good with giving us exposure, and that's what they said they hung their hat on, with making their sort of USP with the placement. So we'd do everything, the interns, there'd be the MRes students, the interns, and then the two senior guys who are leading it up. And the interns would be there to help the MRes guys deliver, but you'd always be in the meeting when we're planning sessions for the week, and you'd have to go in on a Monday, for example, plan the sessions for the week and get in, and you'd have your input. They'd consistently frame it in a way where it's teaching you rather than telling you. So they'd put a session together, deliberately leave a couple of bits out, and it would be on us guys to piece together the rest of the puzzle. In terms of coaching, it was really good. We got to deliver everything 9s up to 23s. So you get to deliver your fundamental movement skill sessions to these kids who you're trying to teach your basic acceleration, deceleration, change of direction, patterns to, and your max V, sorry. And then you go to your 23s where you're really focusing on performance and you're trying to drag these guys into, we used to say we're trying to get them to go across the road, which is where the first team training was. So in terms of building through it, you get a really nice foundation with the under 9s where you initially start watching the MRes guys and then you start to deliver sections of it. And then when the MRes guys have to knuckle down and get their dissertations and things done, that's when they then lean on you. They're like, you've had 6 months, go and deliver a session to the under 10s. We'll sit in the meeting, we'll plan it out, and you just go and deliver. And then they'll always come to you and ask for your feedback, and then they'll provide you feedback on yourself and how they thought you could manage the session better.
And did you have any hard times through that internship in terms of getting buy-in from players or trust from other coaches or players? And how did you go through those harder periods on your internship?
Yeah, had some hard ones as well, because you don't want to make a mistake when you're at a club like Crystal Palace. It's a Premier League club and the badge carries a weight when you're there. And that was probably the most nervous I've ever been in my career, other than when I got to Paris eventually. But like that, up until that point, I was definitely the most nervous I've been in my career when I first had to deliver a session in front of the senior guys and they were going to come and provide us some advice. The way I got around it was I just delivered it as it is. And I took the mindset of, I'm literally here to make mistakes and I'm here for these guys to try and improve me as a practitioner. So I'm just going to firm up and take whatever happens on the chin. Got some pretty tough advice at times as well. There was a point where I wasn't really confident to go and deliver alongside the masters guys. And one of the senior guys said to me is, you're not here to pick up cones and do that stuff. Like, we don't need someone for that. And you need to start mucking in sessions and start taking the reins, because I didn't really know how to interact with another coach in a session like that.
Yeah, and I've been through those periods as well, where you take things as criticism all year, and it just suddenly have to start to think you're still evolving as a coach. You're not getting paid fully amount to lead the sessions fully, so you're here to learn and develop. And then you just have to think that every coach has been in that situation as well. And then everyone has best interest ultimately for the players to develop. So it's how are you working as a team and how everyone helps drive towards that goal.
Yeah. That was the thing. I see it on applications all the time. It talks about working within a multidisciplinary team. And I think just working within a team is tough, especially when you're co-delivering a session. It's really hard.
Yeah, and then everyone wants to get involved, do little parts, and everyone has their own maybe philosophies and agendas. So it's how you start to piece everyone's philosophy into driving towards the same goal and the same message for the players. Because the last thing you want is to confuse the players, or the players to have see disagreements going on from coaches as well.
Yeah, exactly. And to be fair, at Palace, they were really good. We didn't have too many disagreements because Palace made it very clear that here is the Crystal Palace way of doing things. Anything outside of this isn't what we want. We want this, and that is it. We want to identify on a football pitch. We want to be able to identify what one's a Crystal Palace player if they were all wearing the same kit. So that sort of mitigated the whole issue of different philosophies and things like that. And that was a really good lesson I took away. And it's one that I take when I'm leading now, is I want you to have your own individual essence on things, but I want that to be in your session. I want, when you're delivering on a program that's got my name at the top of it, it needs to look like an athlete that I'd be happy with. And the means of how you get that is up to you. It's fine with me. But here's what they have to do. They have to accelerate really well. They have to decelerate really well. And they have to change direction correctly. And they have to run with correct form. Because I've seen a lot of coaches who take the standpoint of, I'm going to make a bad movement quicker rather than I'm going to make a bad better. It frustrates the life out of me in this industry.
So let's talk about that. So I completely agree with you there. So how do you go about those situations where your coach that you're working with might have that different philosophy and might be insistent in doing it their own way, but which goes against the team values?
I've been lucky that everyone's had a buy-in, because I've worked with people who are a bit younger than me, and I'm doing what Kurt and them guys done for me, where I'm guiding them through the industry a little bit. The way we deal with it is they'll come to me with a session and I'm like, it's a really good session, but you haven't outlined as to where you're going to get the technical benefit from it. Because what this currently is, like I said, you're making a bad movement quicker, not a bad movement better. And the normal rebuttal is, kids aren't going to want to learn this stuff. And fortunately, it's not that they want to learn it, it's that they have to learn it, because we're trying to make super fast, super strong athletes that can play well into their 40s. And the way you do that is by having correct biomechanics. And normally when you explain it like that to people and you provide a solid rationale, they start to understand. They might not necessarily agree because they want the quickest bang for their buck, but when you put your foot down and say, here's the rationale, here's why we stick to it, you're welcome to have a free reign in a session, but here are the key points you have to hit every session.
Yeah, and I think, like you mentioned, having always a clear reason why you're doing something. I see a lot of coaches try and implement things from Instagram or fancy things they might have seen other coaches do, but they don't have a reason why they're doing it. Let's say a speed drill, for example, or a complex exercise in the gym, but they don't actually have the outcome of what they wanted to get from. So always having a reason why you're doing a certain drill is key.
Definitely. Like, rationale is important in a million and one aspects. So like when I was at Wimbledon and I was leading a phase, by the end of it, you'd constantly have coaches asking why, you'd have parents asking why, you'd have the kids asking why. And two things that I've really learned from that is, a rationale is the most important thing in the world. If you don't have a rationale, you shouldn't be doing something. Once you've provided that rationale, if you cannot explain it to a 5-year-old, you should not be attempting to explain it at all, because you do not understand it enough. And there was something that we got taught by a guy called Sean Joff at university. And that resonated with me, as it has resonated with me forever. Because if I cannot sit and explain it to my 5-year-old little nephew or my little cousin, why should I try and explain it to a 16-year-old who has a lot more knowledge than that 5-year-old?
No, I have a similar one where I say, if you can't explain it in less than 30 seconds, then it doesn't make sense to yourself. So let's move on to you from your internship at Palace, you went to work at Wimbledon, is that right? And then gradually that progressed into a part-time role. So Did you have any learnings different? Did anything's changed from your placement to placement?
Massively. So yeah, the first year at Wimbledon was an internship in the foundation phase, and things really fell into place for me there, which was nice. In terms of learnings, it was like chalk and cheese, man. To Palace, where you've got this new £50 million facility being built around you, you've got access to floor space and all of the bells and whistles that you'd really think come with a football club, and then go into a Cat 3 academy in AFC Wimbledon where the budget doesn't exist. Like, money is just something that you hear people talk about. You have to get so creative with what you're doing on the pitch, and you have to really fight tooth and nail for everything you get. So, I was by the end of it trying to introduce my under 12s to the gym. And when you've got your rehab boys in the gym who from the 16s and 18s in the gym, and you've got 2 squat racks in the gym and 2 watt bikes, and then the gym's a box that's no bigger than most people's kitchen, you are really having to fight tooth and nail to provide rationales as to why you should be doing things. And you are working with next to nothing. So your creativity has to come into it a million times.
I imagine that's
more.
probably where you learn more as a coach, in those environments where you've got to be creative. You've got to try and do things with minimal equipment, or in spaces where you wouldn't really learn in your degree to where you might coach the ideal S&C session there. So I imagine that's where you developed a lot as a coach then.
Yeah, definitely. So I was really happy that I got to see what would be considered a gold standard first at Crystal Palace, because I knew the standard then, and I took away a lot of learnings from Crystal Palace, and the philosophy that I use now is still based on what I'd done at Crystal Palace. It's all around movement functionality, and I'm glad I went to Palace where they taught fundamental movement skills as such a high priority, because I just took that logic, applied it into Wimbledon just without all the gadgets. Really had to hone that coaching eye and try to use parents who are available. Come and film this. I want you to see what I'm seeing. I want to explain it to you so you can work on it in your own time, and trying to get that buy-in from every single avenue rather than just from the players, because you're working with limited time, you're working with no money. You've got to learn ways to get a lot out of these kids in a very short amount of time.
And in a high pressure situation in football as well, where parents are pressurizing their players, not pressurizing their players, but want their players to get to the highest level. The coaches are very demanding, I imagine, at that level as well. And there's a lot of pressure on the kids to wanting to get to that professional level.
Definitely, yeah. I was super lucky with the people I had around me at Wimbledon. A phase lead in the foundation phase was a guy called Nick Wright, and he was like the best person to work with ever, because I'd turn up to training, I'd have my session plan, he goes, what do you need, how long do you need, where do you want? And he'd sort me out, and then would move everyone else around me. He'd be like, parents are saying this, I'm going to sit down in a meeting with you and we'll go through it with me. I also had my boss for my first year there was a guy called Liam Connor, who's I still consider him my mentor. Every time something goes on in my career, he's the first person I speak to. Every time I want to think about shifting roles, or speak to him and get him to rationalize it to me. And I was lucky with him. I found very much someone who I'd consider to be like a big brother in the industry for me, to hold my hand a little bit.
And just to say that not every environment you'll be that lucky, will you, in terms of having a certain amount of time or people working around what you need. So yeah, you was quite lucky in the sense that you got that.
Yeah, definitely. And like people I know in the industry, I've heard some absolute horror stories from where they've had horrible places to work. And I just think sometimes things just fall into your lap, and it's on your job to take advantage of them. And that's the way I looked at my time at Wimbledon, was just take advantage of this great thing that I've got in front of me, and a blank canvas to go and stamp my imprint on.
You mentioned a couple of really good mentors there, or informal mentors there, that you worked with and still consider now. And I like one of the learnings that you mentioned before we started recording was never be the smartest person in the room. And does that still resonate with you now? And how did mentors really help you develop as a coach, and what the importance of having one in your career?
You know how it is. I come from an athletics background and I played rugby, and I've always been a bit of a character in places. So I came with a level of confidence that sometimes bleeds into being arrogance. And trust me, the industry has a way of beating that out of you in one way or another. In terms of not being the smartest man in the room, is something I developed in my time at Wimbledon, because I stopped going from questioning things as to thinking my way of thinking is better, to questioning things to becoming something that I can learn from. There was a way I was teaching acceleration. It's the biggest thing I'll always remember, is the way I was teaching acceleration to kids. And my boss Liam watched it, and he went, your session's really good, but what you're doing is wrong by 2%. And I was like, okay. And he explained what it was to me, and he went, you don't focus on projection. And I was like, okay. Explain. And he sat with me for 10 minutes. He explained what he wanted, explained a couple of ways I can get this out to kids. And I went, yeah, I'm not as smart as I think. And then I got that idea of just not being the smartest man in the room, because I'm like, if I think I'm right, and if the situation is ever true where I am the smartest in a person in a room, that room is then relatively useless to me, other than being able to help some other people out. I'm not going to learn anything by being in there. And time is a limited thing in this industry. You have no time when you've got to work super hard to make things happen. So when you get time around people, you want them to be able to give you something and you give something maybe in return. It's got to be a two-way street in this industry.
What are the key qualities that make a good mentor in terms of, let's say, a young coach is looking for a mentor now? What are the key qualities that person should be looking for when they're trying to find a good mentor?
Someone who's giving and someone who is harsh with reason. That is the biggest thing. And obviously it comes with the way you like to learn. I've learned recently that I do quite like to be told where I'm wrong, providing you can provide me a reason so I can improve, right? If you just go to me, you're wrong and leave, I'm going to be like, what do you want me to do? Where if you come to me and go, you're wrong, here's the reason why you're wrong, then I'm loving it. Find someone who's half with reason and find someone who's just willing to give you time. The best thing a mentor can say to you is, let's meet for a coffee. I've got 45 minutes. Who you'd consider a mentor is going to be extremely busy because it's a busy industry. If someone's willing to give you 45 minutes of their time, go and take it. And if you can, try and take 15 minutes.
And then also, from what I've seen from the other side of doing some mentoring as well, is two-way process. So I see a lot of coaches asking for things, but then maybe not offering anything in return. So it's how also that coach might be able to support the mentor that they're working with. And it's a two-way process as well. And I think that'll provide both value to both parties.
Yeah. The industry is still old school in the sense that if you want something, you got to give something, right? So yeah, you can go, let's go for a coffee. I'll sit down, I'll buy the coffees, just sit down with you on paper. What you really want to be doing is, say your mentor's working, like Liam was, and say I wasn't there. Say your mentor's working at ASU, right? You want to say to them, can I come in? Can I watch one of your sessions? Can we sit down afterwards for 10 minutes and have a chat about it? And then I'll help out. I'll do whatever you want. I'll come pick up your cones. I'll come if you need someone to take a couple of boys off to do something individual. Let me know what it is, and I'll go and do it for you. They're the sort of things you need to offer in return because everyone always needs a spare body in S&C. There's a lot of times you're delivering in football with a group of 20, 24. You've got to be able to provide a decent amount of service for all of them. You always need an extra body.
So now, so you've mentioned a lot around working within sport, but now you've started to you've moved into the school space. So how's that experience been in terms of your coaching and anything different really in terms of coaching wise to the time within the football?
Yeah. So the private school was tough. It was actually an incredibly tough decision to make. And in the end, just complete transparency, like finances came into it. It's not the most affluent of industries at a medium level or even a high level. When you get them lottery ticket jobs, then your finances start to make a bit more sense. So financially, I was getting offered something that was very tough to refuse, and the opportunity to go and build something and imprint my name on an industry that I never actually thought I'd work in. I never had any interest of going back to a school. Frankly, I wasn't a massive fan of school when I was there, and I thought, oh God, stay away from them as far as I can. But the opportunity came up to go and be a head of S&C, and I wanted that title. I felt I was ready to go and take that step in learning the job. In terms of differences, like going from what I'd consider elite sport, if you're in an academy, a football academy, you're in an elite environment at the end of the day. Working in the elite wheelchair racing side of things, I've always worked in elite. So going from this super high level of mega demanding on time and on your attention, on what you're doing, to go in to participation level for the most part. And thankfully at Royal Russell, we've got a pretty successful boys, girls and girls football and netball programs that require a lot of time and S&C work. It was just such a stark difference. Like the tempo was completely different. I got there and the boss who hired me, he gave me a list of things to done. I got it done in a week and he was like, this is meant to last you a term. And I went, I'm sorry, man, this is the way I'm used to working. Like, he's like, where did you find the time? I was like, just got it done when I got home.
I imagine you'll have different challenges there in terms of kids' ability to move, because if they're not in an academy environment, they might have not had as much exposure to different training, and also their buy-in towards S&C and their actual understanding of physical development as well. And that's where different challenges will be presented.
Yeah, so that was like the first 6 months really, is getting that buy-in, getting my face known around the school to the kids, to the parents, to the teachers, and getting them to understand why I'm here and what I'm trying to do. You have to fight tooth and nail, even in like private education, because it's never as clean cut. You never got enough staff. The amount of kids, you're taking more and more kids on each year. And it was just trying to get a decent exposure to kids and making it in a way that's fun. So it doesn't seem like it's just running, it's a game, it's purpose. Becoming really games-based in my, like, on pitch and on court practices has been a big learning process for me there. And then in the gym, making it clear, concise, and providing a reason and creating an environment for these kids to make mistakes. Because the gym's hard for these kids. Like, they're not natural movers. Like you said, they're not in academies. They're not natural movers. Just providing a safe environment for them to make a mistake and feel comfortable doing it.
And you're going to be different way of coaching, but also how you get by, and also your coaching language, how you might use it, because you might be harder to reference towards football, for example, if you work in an academy, and especially if you're working with athletes in different sports as well, in the same gym and the same environment, you've got different challenges there in how you use your language.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, thankfully, like, I've never been one to shy away from trying to, well, not recently anyway. I don't want to shy away from trying to learn different sports. I find niche sports quite interesting, hence, the wheelchair racing stuff. But I didn't know anything about netball. I sat with our head of netball for ages, learned about what it takes and what happens in the game, and tried to go through that. Basketball, the same thing with our head of basketball, tennis, as much as I can try and learn, so that when I have these kids in the gym, I'm applying it to something. So that, I don't know, before half term, I had a tennis player in the gym, and she was questioning why we're doing things like a wood chop. And I went, okay, how would you play a forehand shot? And she does it. And I'm like, right, now what movement does that look like? She's like, oh, it's a wood chop. And I was like, oh, look, miracles have occurred. You understand? Just trying to piece the puzzle together for them rather than allowing them to
I've done
figure
a
it
bit
out.
of work in school as well. And I find those moments really rewarding when you see a kid in front of you, where they get their light bulb moment, where they realize, start to piece things together, and why you're doing things in the gym, or why you're doing things in your sessions to relate to their development. And that's really rewarding as a coach.
I've been pretty lucky we had a new head of academic PE come in, and I can't speak highly enough of her. She's amazing. So I was doing core PE as a gap fill because we just didn't have enough PE teachers initially. And she's come in and gone, S&C has to be in there, and the way you teach these kids has to be in there, because it just provides a different facet to our core PE program. So years 7, 8, and 9 through the winter months come into the gym with me for a half time, and they learn how to use the gym. They learn the key movements, and they go away and we build on their terminology, moving them towards what the GCSE terminology looks like. And that's probably been one of the more rewarding sides of it is you get these kids at the start of the term and you're teaching them flexion, extension, abduction, rotation. You're teaching them what the muscles do depending on what year they're in, and you're teaching them these movements. And you watch them in the first week, and they know nothing and they can't really do too much. And then you get 6 weeks down the line, you're in their assessment lesson, you call them over, you question them. They can answer questions immediately off the tip of their tongue, and they get it and they understand it. And then you ask them to apply it to them, and they can apply it, and they're doing them flawlessly. And you're like, that's 6 worth of work with a young brain that's just absorbed everything like a sponge. Granted, not always the case, because you do have some kids hate sport generally, and that's fine. Sport's just not their bag. But that rewarding moment where you've got this kid who's knew nothing prior, now knows everything you've tried to teach him or her, who then couldn't move at the start, couldn't even complete a goblet squat correctly, and is now flawlessly doing a goblet squat and even showing you how to do an RDL, and is going around the room and correcting people. They're the moments you end up living for in a space like private education.
And that brings us nice full circle in terms of why we enjoy being in S&C and why we're part of an industry that can be quite hard and quite demanding, and like you mentioned before, a lot of time in your life as well. So what are the plans next in terms of your coaching? Any goals in terms of where you want to get to, or is there anything you want to work in?
Yeah, I'm trying to make sure that the wheelchair racing side of things is progressing along, because I don't mean just from my end. As a country, I've taken on a role with England Athletics to lead the S&C on the para side alongside my current role. And I just want to see us as a nation, and England Athletics and GB as the governing bodies, I want to see them push parasport as far as it can go. We're taking good steps with equal pay, but we need some young blood in this space. Everyone I coach around I'm only 25. Everyone I coach around is a fair whack older than me, at least 15 years. So I want to see some young blood in it. I want to start being the one to try and drive that change in the sport and get young people interested in wheelchair racing and coaching in it, and showing them that there's a career here. You're just going to have to fight a little bit for it. In terms of like personal goals going forward, getting the silver medal in Paris was amazing. And I think trying to upgrade that to a gold in LA over the next 4 years is my long-term goal with my boy Marcus.
That'd be a great trip, wouldn't it, to LA?
Yeah, it'd be a nice one. It'd be a nice one. It'd be nicer if we come back with them. I've also got some work I'm doing with Tanzania through one of my athletes at the Weir Archer Academy. We're trying to progress parasport out there, and that's again like another long-term goal for me. And I think in the short term is just get my gym renovation done at work.
It'd be a nightmare, that one. And see whether you can do that before LA in 4 years.
I'll have it done by the end of this year. It'll look really good, man. I'll send you some photos.
So just to finish, have you got 3 pieces of advice you give to an S&C coach who's currently studying or just graduating in terms of how they want to get into the degree and how they can best make their career going forward?
Yeah, definitely. The best piece of advice I can give you is a career in sport, lifetime in sport is never ever going to be a straight line. You've got to fight tooth and nail, and you've got to burn the candle at both ends to get where you want to go. So just be prepared and do it early. I didn't do it early enough. I just wish you guys, while you're at uni, you have a bit of time there. If you're not working alongside your degree, go and take 2 placements, go and learn in different sports. Like the placement I wish I did at university was I wish I applied for a placement at the Royal Ballet. How amazing would that have been to learn? I didn't think I had the time when I was there. So go and just burn the candle at both ends. Go and learn on the job. You'll learn so much more in 6 months on a placement than you will in 3 or 4 years in a degree. The other thing is burning the candle, because you be prepared that financially this is a tough industry to work in, and you're probably going to have to do some private work. So find your niche, start building your brand. One, because privately that'll benefit you with getting clients, but equally when you come to apply for jobs, someone will know you. Especially in the world of football, I would assume rugby is the same, I would assume cricket is the same. It's a small world. Everyone ends up knowing everyone, and it's that what's the saying? It's 2 steps removed, right? You're always 2 steps removed from,
7 steps of separation. So 7, yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's meant to be 7, 100% in football. Is like, you always know someone, right? And I think my last thing is just be open to making mistakes. The things you learn on your degree, you're going to be taught these are right. You're going to go into the real world, try and apply it and be like, oh, okay, maybe I'm not finding that's completely true. Just be prepared to make mistakes and really try and seek out advice from everyone. That would be the main thing. Equally, as someone who missed 2 years of freshers, enjoy your freshers.
I mean, because when you get into S&C, you're not going to have time for that sort of stuff.
Oh, no, man.
But no, thank you, Jay. There's a lot of great learnings and great stories to tell as well in terms of advice and different to the norm as well that I've heard previously. So thank you very much for sharing that.
No worries, man.
So if anyone's got any questions, is there any way people can just get in touch with you in terms of asking for advice or anything?
Yes, my LinkedIn's always on. I'm sometimes a bit slow replying on there because I'm normally super busy. My business Instagram is Foster Performance Training on Instagram. If you shoot me a DM on there, it shoots straight to the top of my notification, so I'll see it on there. Ask me anything. Equally, if anyone ever wanted to come down and see what wheelchair racing is actually about, Weir Archer Academy.
Where's that based?
Based in Kingston.
Yeah, so I'll put those in the show notes as well for people to come in. But thank you very much, Jake. Appreciate your time.
No stress, man. Cheers.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Athletic Skills Podcast. I hope you enjoyed our discussion and found it helpful in learning more about impacting your youth athletes' movement and physical development. If you did enjoy this episode, please take a moment to give us a subscribe and share to any other coaches or teachers that you think it may help. Also, if you have any feedback or topics that you'd like us to cover in future episodes, please feel free to reach out to us on social media or on the email in the description. And we'll be more than happy to try and tackle those challenges you are facing as a sports coach or a PE teacher. Thank you very much, guys, for listening. I look forward to speaking to you soon.